Hey, everybody, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yep, we can.
Yeah, good. I was listening to Ben Tucker. Don't believe anything he said. You know, he's just making stuff up. And now let's see. We're in Skowhegan, right? And this is for you're the regional school, so you've got people there from where? Canaan and Madison, and how about as far as Athens, Solon? Do you go up that far and over into Franklin County as well?
Say yes.
All around. Well, listen, let me start out. I'm not going to make a long speech, but let me start out with just a few minutes about what it is we do down here, what I'm doing, how my time is spent, and then we'll have hopefully plenty of time for questions. As Ben suggested, this job I have found of being a United States Senator is really two separate jobs. One is the job that you read about in your civics books and you hear about on the news, and it's the image you have of a senator who's somebody down here helping to write laws, going to committee meetings, asking questions, voting on bills, and that kind of thing. So that's the major part of the responsibility. But in addition, I get a huge amount of letters and emails and requests and phone calls from people in Maine with particular individual problems. My Social Security check didn't arrive this week. The Defense Department has lost the medal that I was supposed to get. Or my town needs help with getting the flood maps done properly. In other words, a lot of individual problems, and that's what people like Ben work on up there. So it really is working sort of in two different worlds at the same time. Just to give you an idea, we get between 2,000 and 4,000 letters a week from Maine on everything you can imagine, from public issues down here and international issues to the kinds of individual requests that I mentioned. So it really is, as I've come to realize, a double job. And my schedule is, I'm generally down here, come home on Thursday night. There's a late plane out of Washington Thursday night. I think it's at 10:10, gets back to Portland about midnight, so I get home in Brunswick a little after midnight. I'm in Maine on Friday. Often, I think this Friday, I've got a bunch of meetings, traveling around, seeing people in Maine. Saturday, I spend with my family pretty much, although not always. And then Sunday afternoon, I come back to Washington. So that's the way my schedule works. I'm generally home in Maine most weekends and down here during the week. The schedule here is completely different every day. It's hard for me to even remember everything that happened yesterday, but I had several committee meetings, and of course last night was a big night down here. It was the President's State of the Union address, which is an annual event where the President comes and speaks. It's the only time when the entire United States government is in one place at one time, where you have the members of the House, the members of the Senate, the U.S. Supreme Court, the members of the President's cabinet, all in the House chamber, and the President addresses the country. It's right in the Constitution that the President is to address the Congress each year on the State of the Union, the state of the country. And that's what the President did last night. This morning I started with some early press interviews about the speech last night. And then I went back over to my office, had a meeting with a group of people involving education in Maine, some people from the University of Maine and the technical colleges down around in Penobscot County, and then went from there to a meeting with anybody from Maine that wants to see me and come down. Is here on a Wednesday. We have a coffee at the office and people can come in. We had blueberry pound cake this morning. We always are trying to use Maine products. And then I went from there to chair a hearing of the Rules Committee on how to make it easier for military people to vote when they're overseas. In other words, absentee ballots for people overseas. Went from that hearing immediately over to an Intelligence Committee hearing where we were asking questions of the director of the CIA and the director of national intelligence, the head of the FBI, about what are the threats to the U.S., what are the programs that are working, what isn't working. Now I'm here with you. Later this afternoon, there'll be votes on the Senate floor, I believe, on flood control. And I've got some more meetings, a whole series of meetings all the rest of the afternoon. No hearings this afternoon. And then tonight, having dinner with an admiral here in Washington who the Navy is very important to us in Maine because of Bath Iron Works and the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. So that's a kind of typical day, except there isn't a typical day. It's always something different. It's very exciting because you're learning new things all the time, meeting lots of people, and in the end, hopefully doing some good for the country. And that's really the whole point. So with that as background, I invite you all to come. Be sure you're near enough to the mic so I can hear you, and I'd be glad to answer whatever questions you might have about what it's like down here, what's going on, and you know, what we're doing for Maine and for the country. So why don't I quit there, and you guys can ask me some questions. It's great to be with you, by the way. I used to live in Skowhegan. I don't know if you know that. I lived up on the corner of Court and High Street. If you go up there, there's where they built the new courthouse, the new district court. There's a house where you can see the parking lot goes right around the house on Court Street, and that's the house I lived in about 40, I hate to tell you, 45 years ago. I can tell you the rent was $90 a month, and fuel oil was 19 cents a gallon, and I think gasoline for the car was about 25 or 30 cents a gallon, if you can imagine that. But I had a wonderful time living in Skowhegan, had lots of friends up there, still have friends in the Skowhegan area. So fire away if you got some questions.
Hello, I'm Amy Walton from Maine Central Institute. And
Yeah, can you come a little closer to the mic? I can't hear you very well. Go ahead.
I'm Amy Walton from Maine Central Institute.
Yep.
And my question is, what's your feelings about the State of the Union that was on last night?
Well, it was really interesting to listen to reactions this morning because the Democrats were saying what a great speech and the Republicans were saying what a terrible speech. You know, I thought it was a pretty strong speech. I thought the president was very comfortable. He joked a couple of times. He seemed relaxed. He covered a lot of territory, a lot of topics, and you know, I didn't agree with him on everything. I've got to drink some water here. I'm going to cough. But I thought he did a good job, and I was particularly glad to hear him talking about opportunity and opening up opportunity. And one of the things that's somewhat relevant to you guys, excuse me, I've had a cold this week, but you don't really have time to have a cold down here. I don't know if you noticed it, but in the speech, he charged Vice President Biden with making sense of federal job training programs. The last time I checked, there were something like 57 different programs, and I think it's a place where we really need to talk about how to coordinate those programs and make them really work so that they're in fact preparing people for real jobs and doing what they're intended to do. So overall, I like the tone of the speech. As I say, there were some things I had some reservations about, but I've never heard a speech yet where I agreed with 100% of it. So I thought it was a good speech.
Hello, my name is Cheyenne Slavinsky. I'm from Skowhegan, and I'm in the Culinary Arts program at Somerset Career and Technical Center. And I was wondering, you spoke earlier about how you spent most of your week in Washington, D.C., and you spent only the weekend here in Maine. And I was wondering if perhaps how you felt on that, if perhaps you wanted to spend more time in your own state, if there was even more need for you to be here to help further.
Well, what I didn't mention about the schedule is that about every fifth week, we go home. In fact, last week I was in Maine all week. I didn't count them up. I think I had about 25 meetings. I was with Ben Tucker all day Friday, for example, in Franklin County, and started out in the morning in Farmington, and then went up to Stratton, back down to Kingfield, met with a bunch of businesses, talked with people from the Chamber of Commerce. So about every fifth week, there's a what they call a home district or a state work period, and most senators go home and do the kinds of things that I did all last week. I was in Scarborough, Portland, Bangor, Waterville, Auburn, Franklin County, Brunswick, you name it. Also, sometimes during those weeks, senators travel to different parts of the world. For example, in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be going to Israel with another senator because I'm on the Armed Services and Intelligence Committees, and a great deal of what we're focused on is the Middle East. And I have found in my life that there's nothing like seeing something firsthand. So we're going to spend 4 or 5 days in Israel on the West Bank talking to Israelis, Palestinians, intelligence people, military people, State Department people, people from that area, and then going to the country of Lebanon, which is another important country in that region. So you're absolutely right. I love getting back to Maine and spending as much time as possible. And it's a question of trying to find the right balance and also have a chance to hang out with my family some too.
My name is Caitlin Babin. I'm from Athens. I wanted to know, it's been 22 years since a new amendment has been ratified. Do you see another amendment coming into play anytime?
I'm sorry, the Equal Rights Amendment?
No. Do you see another amendment coming in soon?
Oh, another amendment to the Constitution, you mean?
Yes.
There are always several amendments sort of in the proposal stages. I don't know of any that are close to the necessary requirements for ratification. As you know, amending the Constitution is a difficult process. You have to go through the Congress with a supermajority, more than just 50%, and then it has to be ratified by 3/4 of the states. So it's a hard thing to change the Constitution, which is probably a good thing. And I don't know of any amendments, proposed amendments, that are close to reality at this time. There are always people that have different suggestions and proposals. I've heard people, for example, propose amendments about campaign finance reform to deal with the explosion of money in campaigns. But I don't know of any that are really at the stage where it looks like they're going to go.
Good afternoon, Senator. My name is Brendan Tolman. I'm from New Portland. I'm a senior in the outdoor leadership program here. Me and my classmates are looking into getting jobs in the Maine outdoors, and we would like to know if there was anything we could do to help you support a new national park in northern Maine. We know you're a huge fan of the national park system, and we recognize the jobs that they bring. And we would like to get jobs in that field, and I was wondering what we could do.
Well, the first thing I would say to you and the young lady who spoke to me earlier, who's in culinary arts, you're probably aware you're joining the fastest growing industry in the world. Travel and tourism is the fastest growing industry across the whole planet. And so, and I see it as certainly a part of Maine's future. It always has been. But when I was governor, I was always trying to think of ways to get our visitors not away from the coast, but to understand that there's more to Maine than just lighthouses and lobsters, and that there's a great interior part of the state, whether it's up in the Moosehead Lake region, over the Rangeley Lakes, Allagash, Aroostook County, you name it, tremendous areas. As far as the national park is concerned, I am a big fan of the national park system, but I'm pretty reluctant about a new national park in Maine, and I'll tell you why. I'm a big advocate of more conservation land and more public access to lands. I'm worried about control. A national park is think of it as an island in the middle of your state that's controlled almost exclusively from Washington. All the rules, can there be snowmobiling, can there be hunting and fishing, how many people can go, what will be the parking, whether or not there'll be hotels, all of those decisions are made somewhere other than Maine. And that makes me nervous because when I was governor, you know, here I am down here in Washington, but I still am a little reluctant to, in effect, sign off on a big hunk of Maine and say, okay, Mr. Secretary of the Interior, you know, it's all yours. So I'm interested in the possibility. I understand completely the economic benefits of a new park in Maine, and as you know, they're talking about so-called North Woods National Park up near Millinocket and near Baxter. But the issue that has me hung up is control, and if we can structure it in such a way that Maine would not lose control of that property and that Maine people would have a lot of input and some power with regard to those kinds of decisions, then I'm willing to listen. I also want to be convinced that it will, in fact, be an economic benefit to the region. I know there are a lot of people who are convinced it will, others who are not so sure. And so it's an open question with me. I haven't made my decision. In the past, I've opposed it, but I'm still listening and you know, waiting to be convinced. But I'm just being honest with you. The idea of signing over a big hunk of Maine to the federal government just makes me nervous. And if there's some other way we can do that, then I'd be more willing to listen.
Hello, my name is Anastasia, and I'm from Anson, and I'm in the digital graphic arts here in this program. I was wondering if there are any steps we could take or that you might be able to take to make programs like this, the technical centers, more respectable and well-known, because a lot of them don't seem to get the recognition they deserve.
I heard everything you said up to, are there any things I can do or you can do to make programs like this, and then I couldn't hear the rest.
More respectable. A lot of them don't get, I think, they don't get the recognition they deserve.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We've gone through a period in our history where there's been a lot of emphasis on going to college and going to four-year college, and everybody is saying, you know, you got to go to a four-year college. The truth is, there are plenty of important jobs that are done that don't require 4 years of college, that require particular skills. And I think, you know, I think there are a lot. For example, here's a perfect example. In southern Maine, I'm not sure about central Maine, but in southern Maine, there's a real shortage of skilled technicians to work in what we call precision manufacturing, people that make metal products. There's a company in southern Maine that makes pieces for jet engines, for example. We've got a shortage of workers in those positions, and yet they're very good jobs. They pay well, they have good benefits, but people think, well, you know, I don't want to work with my hands, I'd rather go to college. I think I don't want to discourage people from going to college, but I think we need to respect other kinds of contributions to our society, because we need people in culinary arts, and it's a highly skilled and well-paid profession, by the way, and technical ability to deal with automobiles. I mean, being an auto mechanic when I was a kid was a pretty straightforward thing. If you could use a wrench and a torque wrench, that's about what you needed. Today, you really need to have some serious training in computers and all the technology that's in an automobile today. So I agree with you. I think we've got to say, wait a minute, all work is dignified. All work that anybody that works, puts in a day's work and contributes to their society is making an important contribution, and you don't have to put on a white collar, or in my case, a light blue collar, to be respected in the workplace. So I think that's a good question, and certainly this is an opinion that I hold, and I've expressed it before, and we'll express it again. You're doing important stuff, and you're going to make a real contribution, hopefully, to the life of the state of Maine or wherever you land.
Me again. Oh, I don't remember. What was I going to say? Oh, yes. I have been previously thinking about how, just as you said, that vocational schools such as ours have a form of disrespect amongst many people, especially, and no offense to you, but generally the older generation. When people hear vocational schools, they tend to think, you know, oh, that's for people who aren't necessarily well educated or the smartest. So they're just sent there or go there because they don't have any place to go. I was wondering if there was any way, wow, I can't talk. If there was any way you think it would be a good idea to create a place, an environment for people such as us who are not only intelligent, and even people who aren't so intelligent, but to create a place that's not only a high school, but a vocational school as well, that is compatible for both things and encompasses everything we require and would necessarily want.
Well, it's fascinating you should ask that question, because remember I said I had a meeting this morning with a group of people involving education. This is exactly what we were talking about, and they've got a pilot program going up around the Bangor area, outside of Bangor, where there's more integration between the high school and the technical school. I don't want to sit here off the top of my head and disparage decisions made years ago, but the idea of separating the vocational and the academic high school, I'm not sure was a great idea. To me, they ought to be integrated. By the way, from the quality of the questions you guys have asked, there's no problem in my mind about your intelligence or capability. I mean, you guys are asking great questions and very articulately. So, let's take that one off the table. But the idea that there's a division, that you're on the academic track or you're on the vocational track, I think is a big mistake. I think it's got to be integrated. In order to be successful in whatever you're being trained and working on and learning to do, you've also got to have academic skills. You've got to be able to write and communicate clearly, do math, be able to be skilled with a computer. I mean, there's hardly a job in Maine today that doesn't involve using a computer. And all of that entails all the work systems on computers, the productivity tools. So I see it as maybe we need to reintegrate a bit, and maybe you go. In fact, this program I was talking about this morning, they would go in the morning to the high school and then in the afternoon to the vocational school, and there's a lot of ability to sort of go back and forth. The most fun course I ever took in high school, and we didn't have this division, was mechanical drawing. It was I liked it, but I also liked history, and I wasn't all that good in math. But I think the idea that you do one thing here and a whole different thing there is not very good for our society. And we've got the structures. We've got your school, but we've also got Skowhegan High School and the regional high schools. I'd like to explore more ways to sort of integrate those two and provide the skills training, but also have the academic training as well. So I think that's a really good question, and people in Maine are starting to talk about this and think about it. I know the governor's interested in this, calling it the Bridge Program. I think that's what it's called, to start in your junior year and do a sort of combination. And we ought to get the technical colleges, the community colleges involved as well, I think.
Somerset County has the second highest poverty rate in the state of Maine, and we wanted to know if you had any ideas on how to change that.
Oh, wow. As I mentioned, the first place I lived in Maine was in Somerset County, and the problem is that Somerset County's economy, well, when I was there, we still had the shoe business, and you still have New Balance in Norwich Walk, which I'm trying like the dickens to help support and protect. But there was a huge shoe business. When I lived in Skowhegan, there were 30,000 people in Maine making shoes. Today it's maybe 900, maybe 1,000. But think of that and what a dramatic change that is. The other thing that's happened, of course, is a lot of the work in Somerset County involves the woods, involves forestry. And that's become a business that there's these big machines that can cut a tree. You don't need a chainsaw. They cut the trees, with the machine and then stack them up. And one person on one of those machines can do what 10 people used to do with a chainsaw. So the economy is changing. And we have to constantly be thinking about, what do we do next? Now, the good news is there's opportunity today in a place like Somerset County that didn't exist a generation ago, that's created by the internet. And one of the things I'm working on that I think is most important is rural broadband, so that you can get broadband in Anson and Solon and Emden and the smaller towns, Canaan, out in the countryside, North Anson, North New Portland, New Vineyard. I mean, if you can't get broadband today, you can't do business. But if you can get broadband, you can do business anywhere. And so just like my parents' and grandparents' generation built roads, we've got to build information highways. We've got to be sure that we have broadband both for business and for personal use. So I think there's opportunity, and another good thing that's happening in Somerset County is agriculture. For the first time in living memory, the average age of farmers in Maine is going down. For a while, for many years, it was always getting older and older and older. Now younger people are going into farming and different commodities, organic farming, dairy, and those kinds of things. And that's an opportunity. As you may know, there's a new flour mill right in Skowhegan in the old jail. And I think that's a hopeful sign. So there are opportunities, but it's difficult because we tend to be an urbanized society. And the other thing I can tell you is this is a problem everywhere. You hear about the two Maines, and you have rural northern eastern Maine and the southern Maine around Portland. But as I travel the country and talk to my colleagues here, it's a problem in virtually every state, where the rural areas, because in the Midwest it's all about agriculture, and the same thing is in the forestry, where 10 people can do what 100 people used to do, and a lot of these small towns are just really struggling, and the young people tend to move to the more urban areas. So I think there's no single answer. There's no one thing that will solve all these problems. It has to be a lot of things, but I'll end with this, and I'm sorry this has been sort of a long speech, but it's an important question. The most important thing I've noticed in Maine as I travel the state, and I've been doing this, for 20 plus years, being governor and then now being a senator, the most important thing is local leadership. If you've got a group of people in your town who are willing to go to the meetings and work to get the grants and work in local government and support businesses and celebrate success, that's what makes the difference. I was in Bangor the other night at the Chamber of Commerce. They had 960 people at the Chamber of Commerce dinner last week in Bangor, and it was so much energy and excitement. That's what really makes a community build. So I hope many of you will choose to stay in that area, but if you do, when you do, be engaged, be involved. It's incredible the access and influence you can have as an individual, particularly in a state like Maine. So, I wish I had a simple answer, say, oh yeah, we're going to turn the highway a certain way and everything's going to be all right. It's a complicated question, but I think that a lot of it comes down to community and the energy and commitment of the people in town.
Hi, my name is Jessica Page, and I'm an AP U.S. History student here at Skowhegan. You were governor of Maine for 8 years. How is being a senator different from being a governor, and which do you prefer?
Well, that's the reason I'm smiling is I was talking to one of my colleagues down here recently about being a former governor. There are 11 of us here. There are 11 former governors who are now senators. I think there are 4 Republicans, 6 Democrats, and me. and as an independent. But anyway, I was talking to one of the senators, and he said, well, you know, when I meet somebody who's a former governor and is now a senator, and I ask them which job they like better, and they say senator, I know they'll lie to me about other things. Most former governors like being governor better. I think they're entirely different jobs. And I love being governor. It was a great experience, a great variety, and you felt like if there was a problem, you could reach out and try to really affect the results. Being a senator is a little more frustrating. You're one of 100. In Congress, you're one of 535, including the House. And so it's frustrating. It's a different kind of experience. On the other hand, I get to deal with really big issues. You know, this morning I came from a meeting to join you where we were talking about Iran and Syria and the CIA and spying and, you know, major national and world issues. And that's pretty cool to feel like you're able to make a contribution to dealing with important issues like unemployment in the country or the minimum wage or, you know, global climate change, which I made a talk on yesterday. I mean, this is playing ball at a very high level, and that's very exciting. It's frustrating at times, but also I got to tell you, Mary and I bought a little house. When I say little, it's 950 square feet, so that's not a very big house, about 8 blocks from the Capitol. And generally, I walk to work, at least if it's not raining or really cold. By the way, it's about as cold here as it is up there today, which is, you know, surprising everybody down here. But anyway, when I walk to work, I turn up a street. You can look on Google Maps, Maryland Avenue, which runs right up to the Capitol, and I look up. The sun is behind me, and it lights up the dome of the Capitol with the rising sun, and I say, wow, that's where I get to go to work. You know, how cool is that? And I literally, this morning, I pinched myself. Last night, I was in the audience, and there was the President of the United States. And I shook his hand after the speech. I mean, that's pretty neat stuff. But the most important, the reason it's really exciting is you get to do things to help the country and the state. You get to make a difference. And hopefully you can see the difference in people's lives and in the ability of people to make a living and have good jobs. And that's the most satisfying thing there is in life. My experience is happiness is working hard with other people on something worthwhile. Working hard with other people on something worthwhile. And that's exactly what I get to do every day. And that's why this is a great job. So, you know, I wouldn't compare them. They're just different jobs. I can tell you, having been governor helps me, I think, to be a better senator because I understand a lot of these issues from the point of view of the states, and I think that's helped me to be a senator. But they're very different jobs, and I also had 10 years between the two. Between the time I left governor and the time I ran for the Senate, I had 10 years. I had no idea I was ever going to run for anything again. And that was healthy because I had time out and worked with a bunch of businesses in Maine, did some business myself. So all of that has gotten me to where I am. I told Mary a while ago, I said, I've been preparing for this job all my life. I just didn't know it. And so it's really a great experience. And I hope many of you will be able to come down and visit with me when you're down here in Washington. It's a pretty neat place.
Hi, my name is Chandler Brown. I'm from Skowhegan. I'm a college government class, and I was wondering why teachers can't access their spouse's Social Security after they pass away, and what was the reasoning behind this?
Oh, this is a peculiar problem in Maine, and because of the way our teacher pension program has been set up, and for many years they weren't participating in Social Security. I don't know the details, but it's a problem in some states and not in others. I can't remember. I think Maine is one of 8 or 9 states, as I recall, that has this issue, and it goes back to how the pension program was set up in Maine and which system you paid into for how long. And I know that there are some issues there, and but I think it's something that we have to try to work out with the state. But I honestly, you know, I wish I could give you more detail. I'm familiar with the issue, but not with the details of the history or how we should fix it. I try to be honest. If I don't know the answer, I'll tell you I don't know. But I am aware that it is a problem. But I know it goes back into the history of the teacher pension, of the public employee pension program in Maine. I think I'm right.
We would like to thank you for having this talk with us, and we, I guess we have one more, never mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Shelby Watson, and I'm a student at Skowhegan Area High School as well as Somerset Career and Technical Center. And as a senior, I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed trying to decide on something to major in college. And I'm wondering when it clicked for you that you were interested in being a politician.
Oh, it hasn't yet. Number one, don't be overwhelmed by worrying about a major. You got plenty of time to that. You won't have to decide that for a couple of years, and you may change once or twice after you decide. I'm a great believer. If you look at my career, I've had 6 or 7, I think I counted 7 different careers, not jobs, careers. In my life, I've done I've been in business, I've been a lawyer, I've been a teacher, I've been a broadcaster, I've been a governor, a whole lot of different things. And I'm a great believer that you have to see what life presents you. You have to be willing to go after the opportunities that look the most promising, but don't be overwhelmed. And it's funny about my involvement in politics. I was raised in a family, not that either of my parents ever ran for office, but they were interested in public affairs and issues, and that's what we talked about around our dinner table. We didn't talk about business or sports much. We talked about the president this or the Senate or the Congress or the House of Representatives or whatever, or the state legislature. So I grew up with this as sort of part of who I was. And to be honest, when I was in high school and college, I think I did think about being a politician and running for office. But then I got married and had kids, and it sort of went away. It just wasn't practical. I never ran for the legislature or the city council. I was trying to make a living and support my family. And then all of a sudden, I'm 50. I had been in business. I sold my business and was able to then turn and say, I think I can make a contribution in public life, and ran for governor of Maine. So there was this long period of about 30 years where I really wasn't involved in politics, and I really thought it had passed me by and that it was unlikely that I would ever hold public office, and here I am. So you can't really plan these things. My best advice is whatever job you're in today, or when your first job, when you get out of school, be the best at that job that anybody's ever seen. If you're going to be a lifeguard at a swimming pool or at a pond, be the best lifeguard they ever saw. And I'll finish by telling you a story. There was a kid who went to work at 18, right out of high school, in a political campaign. And they said, okay, your job is to make copies. You run the Xerox machine. So this kid, he went in early and stayed late. He learned to fix the machine when it broke. He made all the copies that people needed. If there was something, if he had time on his hands, he'd go and say, is there anything else I can do? He'd look around for things to do. And he was the best Xeroxer they ever saw. So he goes off to college. The political campaign, by the way, that he worked in, the guy lost. So he went off to college. 2 or 3 years later, another guy is running for president of the United States. One of the people he worked with remembered him because he was so good at what he did and called him up and said, you want to work in this campaign? And sure enough, 2 years later, this young man ends up personal assistant to the chief of staff of the President of the United States. All because he started off so strong doing the, you know, the lowest job in the place, making copies. Now, the reason I know this story is it's my son. And he was born, by the way, in Skowhegan Hospital in 1970, this guy. But it's a classic story where if he had just, you know, gone in and said, oh man, I'm just making copies and I don't need to worry, you know, and this is no big deal and who cares, they'd have never called him back 4 years later. And he ended up working in Bill Clinton's campaign. And then he ended up, they called him, the guy he knew back in 1988 said, well, why don't you come and work in the White House? And he ends up, as I said, personal assistant to the chief of staff of the President of the United States. And it's all because he took that first job as seriously. And I want you guys to think of your first job, whatever it is, as the most important job you'll ever have, because what you're doing is making an impression. And you want the person you work for to, when the next job comes, you want that first boss to say, boy, this young woman was fabulous. She did everything as she was asked. She came up with new ideas. She had lots of energy. She had a can-do attitude. And, you know, that's how you advance. So, again, you poked me and I gave you a speech, which I'm prone to do, I'm afraid. But I feel very strongly about this. Don't be overwhelmed by these choices. You're going to have lots of opportunity, but the most important thing is, whatever you do, be the best. And then you're going to be in good shape for whatever comes down the road. Thanks so much for giving me the time to join you guys.
We'd like to thank you for your time, and we would like to personally invite you to come to our school if you have the time.
I hope I can. Thanks for the invitation.